Well, hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brianna McWilliam, and I am a licensed and board-certified creative arts therapist, author, and educator. And I help adults struggling with insecure attachment go from self-doubting to self-sovereign and calling in those soul-shaking, passionate partnerships that they want. And I am super excited to welcome the glorious Helen Hillix here today. Helen Hillix is a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as an intuitive counselor who specializes in counseling individuals and couples on sacred sexuality, as well as intimacy. And she has over 35 years of experience helping couples cultivate a sacred, shame-free, emotionally intimate, and passionate sex life. And I met Helen because she reached out to me to do a collaboration on a very special symposium on sacred sexuality, which we're going to tell you more about at the end of this video. So make sure you stick around until the end. But in the meantime, Helen, I would love to welcome you here. And I am so excited to dive into the questions we have here for today.
Well, Brianna, thank you so much for inviting me. And, I just love the work that you're doing. I was so excited to collaborate with you, and I'm excited to be here to further our conversation today.
Yay! Okay, so I was wondering if we could start just by maybe first telling us, how do you define those words, sacred sexuality, and maybe even what brought you to that definition?
Well, I think that primarily sacred sexuality involves two things. One is, and perhaps the most important one, is consciousness. Mm-hmm. And when I was a young person, I had so much unconscious sex, and I don't just mean that I wasn't thinking. I mean, I was drunk or high or in complete denial. I wasn't careful about my choices. It's like, whatever, seemed like a good idea at the time, driven by the impulse to connect. Mm-hmm. And there's no shame in that. You mentioned the shame-free aspect to my work. I had so much shame coming out of the sexual revolution and the promiscuity and abortion and abuse that I heaped upon my soul, and it didn't fit me at all. Some people had a glorious time and they felt completely liberated during that time, but it just didn't sit well with me, with my kind of innate spiritual perspective. And I don't mean religious, but I'm going to talk about that in a second. So I want to talk about the consciousness piece, that we cannot have a sacred connection with ourselves or with another person if we're not aware of what we're doing, if we're not aware of why we're doing it, if we're not aware of how we're doing it, if we're not aware of what the other person is experiencing and what they need, and if we're not aware of what we're really looking for. Mm. So many times, I think, especially men in our culture, all their feelings get genitalized. Yeah. And so when they're feeling a real need for comfort, they think they're horny. Or when they feel a real need for, just being soothed and affectionate and intimate, they think they want sex. And so, if you're not aware of what's going on with yourself, and then a lot of women feel like, I'm not going to be used by you. Mm. And, they suppress their own sexual desires because they feel defensive. So there's so much unconsciousness that goes on that prevents people, both, again, individuals, self-pleasuring, having sacred connections with their own body, or with couples that prohibit us from having what we really desire, which is that deep, deep intimacy. And we have to have safety to really feel free to have that deep intimacy. And without consciousness, we can't have safety. Mm. So those things are intrinsically connected. And then on the other side, again, the word sacred, I believe, implies a connection with something greater than ourselves. And for me, that means seeing the divine in you. And, it's interesting because as I look at you and that background behind you, I feel that sacred sexual connection with you. I see the divine in you. And that brings up the other point, that sacred sexuality is not just between lovers. It's really the energy of connection and seeing the sacred in all things. Mm. And I don't care if I'm not religious, so you can be religious, but you don't have to be religious. I refer to the 12-step way of thinking about it, the God of your understanding, a higher power, and it could be just nature. As we're doing this interview, I can look out at the nature preserve behind my house and the avocado orchards, and I feel the divine in that, and most people do.
Yeah.
Most people feel an incredible sense of divinity and sacredness when they're in nature. And that can be the only thing you believe in as a higher power. But to see your partner in that same divine energy that you see nature, or that you see God, or that you see Great Spirit, or however you articulate that, is a part of sacred sexuality. I remember the first time my husband and I we do a ritual every time we have sex, a ritual that connects us to the divine energies, and then we share that with each other. And both of us had a shameful kind of sexual past, shaming ourselves. And so I remember so well the first time we looked into each other's eyes and we saw the God in each other. And it was, we were just crying, and it was unbelievably powerful. And everybody can have that. And that also encourages and helps develop that sense of safety and real deep intimacy, that we are not just safe with one another, but we actually are part of this incredible divinity that is so mystical and magical. And we are that too.
Yeah.
So it engenders this feeling of otherworldliness that we get to bring into our sexual connection, and it just expands it beyond, as some experts say, the bump and grind or the friction and fantasy element.
Yeah. I love that. I love that description. And I love how you bring consciousness and notions of safety and even nature into that, because I come to it with a attachment framework is often what I'm talking about. And I feel like our attachments and our connection to nature is often a reflection to our attachments to our deepest self. And because I do think that our connection to nature is our connection to the divine, and even to the divine within us, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm curious, what would you say most people, like, if there's an issue that you would say is one of the most common issues that people come to you, let's say they want to explore sacred sexuality, or maybe they're encountering some bumps in their sex life, what would you say are the most common issues that you see?
Well, the most common issue I see is that couples are disconnected, that they're looking for sacred sex without any foundation for it.
Can you tell me
They
what does that mean? Like,
Well, I'm thinking of one couple that came to me, and her expressed desire was to have squirting G-spot orgasms. That was her thing.
amen.
Absolutely, nothing wrong with that, except that they didn't have the foundation of intimacy to support that kind of exploration.
Right.
And I think this is really key. The thing that I've noticed as universally is that whatever they say they want sexually is actually a reflection of something deeper that they're craving, that they think the sexual behavior will bring them.
Mm.
And I'm thinking of another couple right now where they'd been married for 22 years. They love each other dearly, but they were having a lot of conflict sexually. He wanted this and she didn't. And, he wanted sex every day and she didn't. And so they had to schedule it. Every other day was their sex day. And that was the way they resolved it, was a compromise, not a healing, but a
Mm.
compromise. And I think that's something that a lot of couples settle for, is that they compromise, they settle for an orgasm when what they really want is something much different. Not that they don't want an orgasm, but that they're really looking for something else. And I think one of the main things that I work with couples about is, what do you think you get from that behavior? And what is it really that you're longing for underneath it?
So I want you, so rich what you just shared, and I kind of want to pick it apart a little bit. The first part about the woman who was seeking the squirting G-spot orgasms, right? And you mentioned that that is actually like an external want of a more deeper internal desire. And I have my own ideas about what that might be, but I was wondering if you might maybe, peel that back a little bit. Like, what is it that, let's say, I'm sure, and I know that in my community, there's a lot of women who would like that, myself included. And, but when we are looking for and asking for that, what is it that you would say on a deeper level we're really asking for?
Well, it depends on the person, of course.
Right.
There's not a universal thing, but in this particular case, this woman is a very smart, educated, highly successful professional woman who, and the one thing that I noticed about it is that it's about her. It's what I want. It wasn't a description that I want to have this incredible experience with my husband. And so, that's the first clue, is that's very interesting, that it's something that you're wanting for yourself. I wonder what that says, on a deeper level, that you're craving, and that it isn't connected to your husband necessarily, although you're wanting your husband to give it to you.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not something she really wants to give herself. It's something she wants her husband to give her. And so, that's where I would start, and that's where I did start, is what is it, what does a squirting G-spot orgasm represent to you, and I believe for her, it represented a desire for deep intimacy that she did not have a clue how to create.
Yeah.
And it also represented that ecstatic experience, that it was a symbol of that ecstatic experience of connection with God in her case, and with her husband, that she saw would happen if she had that expansive, release.
Mm-hmm. It feels like the word surrender kind of comes up to me a little bit too, but it's not quite the fullness of what you're describing. It's almost like
includes it though. Very
right.
Good catch. Very good.
Yeah. And so then the other piece I kind of wanted to pick apart was the second example you described.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering what in that circumstance might we actually be searching for in this.
Okay. Well,
particularly you set up a comparison between compromise and healing. And I would love to know like how you are discerning what is a compromise versus what's a genuine connection and healing there. Because it, like, someone, we might say some therapists might recommend, okay, you have to find a compromise and have sex every other day, right? That's going to fix the problem. And you're like, that's not fixing the problem. So I would love to hear, what's your take on that?
Well, it's interesting because I'd like to substitute the word compromise for coping. I'd like to say that, so many couples and individuals cope rather than heal what's really going on. In this particular case, the guy had two drug addict parents, one who was a survivor of a war and was mutilated from it, disabled. It's like so much unavailability of support and the proper nurturing. And he discovered pornography at 13 and masturbation, and that became his go-to, all of his dependency needs, blah, 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 and all of his self-worth issues. And, he became completely dedicated to bodybuilding, as a way of making himself feel attractive and lovable. And so he had all these coping mechanisms, including wanting sex constantly as a reassurance that he was lovable, that he was wanted. He was wanted. It's so sad. And once his wife realized, and so we discovered all these things in couples therapy. So once his wife saw what was the real origin of that compulsion, she had tremendous compassion for him and very tender moments with him crying and her crying and them holding one another. And then once she realized that she didn't need to withhold from him as a way not to be dominated, that it really was a completely different dynamic, that he was actually needing her to just love him and connect to him, then she felt liberated from her own shame about how her own sexuality in the past had made her feel bad. And
Mm,
she disowned her own sexuality and was focusing on his. So once she got that healing piece, she actually felt way more sexual. And this is the interesting thing to me about focusing on sacred sexuality is I'm not one of those coaches that says I'm gonna give you the best tool and technique. I'm going to help you dive deep and see what's really going on. And then you can manage those other things. And it's like they didn't even talk about oral sex as something they'd like to have more of, or he would like to have more of. They did mention it, but it wasn't a huge issue. But then after all this healing, she texted me or emailed me one day and said, we've had more oral sex both ways in the last 2 months than we've had in 22 years.
yes.
Because those underlying issues were what was really going on. And yes, we could have stopped with, oh, that's a great adaptation.
Mm,
But they came to me because their coping mechanism of every other day, and we're not going to have oral sex except I'm going to give it to him on his birthday, wasn't working.
yeah.
They weren't feeling fulfilled and connected that way. And so, I'm just not an advocate of people that come up with a coping strategy and never heal what's underneath it. Another example of that is women who've been molested and that it involved their breasts or it involved oral sex. And so their coping mechanism is, we're good. You can have sex with me, just don't touch my breasts and don't give me oral sex.
Mm,
Well, it's like that's not a healing experience. That's just shutting down and pushing all that to the side and then pretending like you're good to go.
mm,
And, it makes me sad because the richness of sacred sexuality where you're conscious, and that brings back that element of it, the consciousness of, I notice I don't want my breast to be touched. I wonder why, and what can I do about that?
right. And it's interesting too, because I think in the circumstances that you describe, and maybe even in the second example, it almost felt as if maybe one or both partners were experiencing relationship as a power dynamic. And
Yes.
then so then power dynamics become about control. And
Mhm.
whenever we perceive our partners as trying to wield control over us, I usually advise people to realize that whenever that's happening, to read that as them trying to connect with you. It feels counterintuitive, but when people are trying to wield control, they're really trying to connect. It's just that they learned a coping mechanism that ends up looking like trying to wield control, and it ends up turning the relationship into a power dynamic. And it's hard to feel safe when you feel like you're in, an adversarial relationship with someone that you are in love with.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think there's another element to it. Being a relatively controlling person myself, that, it's often a mechanism to cover up anxiety.
Mm.
And, I may not know that I want their support in that moment, but it comes across as controlling when really I'm just trying to control my environment so I don't feel so insecure and inadequate and anxious in that moment and alone. So,
So
there's,
with that, how do you feel like that applies now? Like, because so we happen to be at the time of this recording in dealing with the coronavirus worldwide. And I know before the call, we had talked about how that's really impacting couples. And in China, we're starting to see the result of being in quarantine for a long period of time, right? And having all our routines disrupted and what's happening to our romantic connections as a result of that. And I wanted to also open that up if there were anything you wanted to talk about.
well, thank you. I love that you opened that up. I know I wanted to talk about that and it's completely slipped my mind because we could talk about 1,000 other things forever. But one of my interviews for my upcoming summit was with Dr. Daniel Ellenberg, who has a colleague in Wuhan, China, who said that this court system is so overwhelmed with divorce filings after the quarantine that they can't even keep up with them for months ahead. And I thought, oh my God, that is so sad. And yet, it's almost like a duh. People don't know how to cope.
Mm.
again, and I want to correct that. People don't know how to respond to challenges with consciousness. We're just not taught that.
Mm.
We are taught to control or compete or manipulate or seduce. We are not taught how to actually handle emotions in a healthy way and to listen to one another and to take ownership for our part and to make a healthy amends. We're not taught all those things. And I'm sure you've heard the phrase, when in stress, we regress.
I haven't. I like that. It's catchy.
Isn't it? And it is so real. When in stress, we regress. And that's what's happening, is that couples, and some couples are really having a great time. But even those couples there are stressful times intermixed in there for sure.
Yeah.
And some couples, before they even had the pandemic, were dreading coming home and having to be with their partner all night.
Mm-hmm.
And so those couples are really, really struggling. And you know what? Maybe they will divorce afterwards, and maybe they should have already.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not one of those people that says every couple ought to stay together. But if you want to own this, as he also wrote an article called Retreat to Advance.
Mm.
And I loved that title because this is a forced retreat. For many of us, it's a forced retreat. And you can handle it in terms of, oh my God, I can't stand you. Let me go into another part of the house until this is over. Or you can say, you know what, I know we haven't been doing that well, or even we have been doing that well. And I would love to come out on the other side of this feeling like a better person, a stronger person with a stronger relationship with you, my partner. And I would love to sit down with you and write out our intentions for our couple and how to handle that. And I want to give you an example. My husband and I did this last night. We've been talking about doing it for some weeks now, of course, but we actually did it last night. And an issue that has plagued our relationship for the 13 years we've been together is that I, like many women, am the overseer of everything that needs to happen in our relationship and in our household and in our yard and everything. I'm the overseer. And he, the man, is, sometimes very reluctantly will agree to take on some tasks. Now, some people don't have that reluctance and some people just have refusal, but that's been the dynamic. And so we sat down and we said, what do we want to create here together? And we agreed completely. We want to be stronger people, more healthy, more aware, more loving, and better partners. And then we sat down and talked about together everything that needs to be done or that could be done in our household and who would take it on. And it's like there was no bickering. There was a little bit of resistance, and then we would come back to what's our intention.
Mm.
And this is a very simple exercise that anybody can be doing right now. And it'll differ depending on what time of life you're in and kids at home and all of that. But every tool I offer my clients comes back to the very first step is to set your intention.
Yeah.
What is your intention? And then you can always come back to that and ask yourself, are my behaviors reflecting my intention? And that brings us to this deep place of accountability of, if I want to create this intention, it's up to me. And I don't get to sit in judgment of my partner. I get to keep coming back together to reevaluate, are we meeting our intention? Are we supporting our intention? And it takes away the blame game, because we're both going to be guilty of sometimes undermining it or not living up to it or whatever. That's okay. Let's just keep coming back together to reassess it and to reaffirm it.
Yeah. And I'm glad you shared that because it was actually where I was going. I've gotten a lot of questions in my online community around how do you, in a state of quarantine, for example, or when you're in a, let's say a crisis situation or a high pressure situation, how do you communicate and weather that storm with someone who has like differing needs than you? So if you have a partner who needs a lot of space in a romantic relationship, for reassurance or to sustain their sense of equilibrium. And then you have a partner who needs a lot of closeness and reassurance during a situation like that. How might you balance that? Like, how would you come together to meet those needs?
Well, I love that question. One of the things that, again, it just reminds me of that interview that people need counseling. People need counseling. I'm going to say it again. And this time is no different. And there are so many of us online that can offer you that. And now more than ever, you can benefit from that kind of support. So that's the first thing I want to say is you're not going to come up with all of this by yourselves, because the person that needs more space and the person that needs more affection, so much of that is complete bullshit to begin with. It's another one of those things. I need blowjobs. I need oral sex. So much of that is just on the surface. It's like, why do you need space and why do you need affection? When my husband and I got together, that was another issue, was that he said, you need so much more affection than I do. And I need a lot more space. And the reality is, after years of working on it, is actually he needs more reassurance than I do. But he had covered that up because of the socialization that men don't need that. And so, that again would be the first thing I would explore is it really true that I need a lot more space? Or am I just afraid of being vulnerable? Or am I afraid of showing how vulnerable I am because you're so overwhelmed with the kids, or whatever it is? Is challenge, this is an opportunity to challenge your old ways of being. And you're not going to be new if you hold on to the same old beliefs and drag them through the pandemic with you. Now's the time. Another thing that we did while we were talking was, my husband and I, we said, what fun things do we want to make a list of too? What things to connect us that we can do that are romantic? What kind of intimacy exercises, can we schedule for ourselves? And also, what kind of daily practices do we need to center ourselves? Whether you're the person that needs more or you think you need more alone time, you could both be meditating. You can both be exercising. You can both be eliminating sugar from your diet. I mean, I just want to throw that out there. And if you drink, don't be drinking now. Don't be that person on Facebook that says, "Dear liver, I know this are going to be tough times, but hang in there with me." It's like, don't be that person. That isn't going to take you to the other side in any kind of way that works. So, and sugar, there are many reasons for that. Sugar is so addictive, and, you don't want to end up weighing 50 pounds more at the end of this thing, but it depletes your immune system. And it also causes, rushes and crashes, and we don't need that now either. So whatever you can do to resolve and improve your communication, your introspection, and your intention to become a stronger, better person and a stronger, better partner. And there are so many tools out there. I mean, I know you have a ton of them on your website. I do on my website, on your YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel, on tons of things that you can access right now. It's never been a greater time to explore the options on Google search.
Yeah. And in that vein, I would love for you to tell us about this big tool that you are offering towards the end of April. You've organized this amazing symposium and event. Tell us more about that.
Well, because of my own kind of dealing with shame and overcoming shame and finding sacred sexuality, and because of all the 35 years of experience with clients, I have a real passion to bring people information about how to liberate themselves from the shame, from body shame, from religious shame, also from the not knowing how to build intimacy. It's not something we are taught, like I said. And so I put together, it ended up being 30 experts mostly, 40 minutes to an hour interviews with 30 experts on sacred sexuality revealed, secrets to passionate intimacy, deeper connection, and lasting desire. And it's all about how to enhance your experience of connectivity between yourself and your partner and the oneness. And it's unbelievable interviews, including yours, I must say.
I had so much fun doing it.
And they are fun. They are fun interviews, and they're powerful, and they're deep, and what an opportunity. They're going to be released one a day for 30 days starting April 20th. And every single interviewer or every single interviewee has a free gift to offer also, which, I mean, it's like yours is an amazing thing. Tell us what it is again.
Yes, I'm actually offering 4 Steps to Passionate Partnership, which is a 4-part video series and downloadable workbook. Basically, it's a course, which I usually charge $167 for, but I'm giving it away for people who sign up for Helen's Symposium, because I think that I love your mission and I love what you've put together, and I am so much in support of that.
And what a generous gift. It gives me goosebumps really right now to think about, because, if people just took your free gift and really worked it while they're, sheltering at home, it could change their lives. And that's what I want to leave people with is, whether it's signing up for my free summit, which is awesome, and I hope you do, or you do something else. It's like, do something to revolutionize your lives, because hopefully you're never going to get another opportunity like this in your lifetime.
Mm.
In your lifetime. I really, and I believe that. I think that there will never be another opportunity like this. It's once in 100 years, and take it and make something out of it. So at the end of it, you don't look back and say, man, I wasted all that time watching Netflix and eating bonbons, and now I'm 50 pounds heavier and stupider and just waiting for my life to start.
Mm.
Or you can say, my life is right this moment, and I'm going to take this opportunity the universe is giving us to dive deep and wide and, and glean every bit of juice out of this experience that I can. And that's what I hope you all choose.
I like that reframe. I like that perspective for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us here for this call today. I feel like I got so much out of it, and I know that my audience will too. And again, make sure you sign up. I'm going to include a link to that in the caption of this video. So check it out. Take advantage of these 30 experts that Helen has collected and all of their free gifts, including my own. Again, if you have any questions or comments or reflections, please comment below, let me know, and maybe we can have Helen back for some further guidance. So thank you so much, Helen, for joining us.
My pleasure. And if anybody wants to find me, you can find me all over platforms under my name, which will be below. So thank you so much for asking me. And I send you so many blessings and so much love, and a big virtual hug to every single viewer. And, let's make the best of this.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.